So without further ado, we've got Alan here tonight to come and share his story with us. It's great to have you here, Alan, if you want to come forward. He's an awesome bloke, and it's great to have him here, and like, you know, his story is like quality, so over to you, mate.
Thanks. Thank you. Well, I think I've lost all credibility. So I apologise for that. This pathetic excuse of a southerner, softy southerner, is here this evening. Maybe we can redeem that by the end of the evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to listen to me just tell a little bit of my story. Sometimes it's a bit weird when you're kind of telling people about your own life. Referring back to it earlier, it can sometimes be a bit awkward, a bit embarrassing, sharing details of your life. A bit, dare I say, like getting undressed in public, which I promise you I'm not going to do. Okay? But obviously this is AlphaMale. It's put on by the church. And obviously there's a Christian focus to the evening, and what I want to do this evening really is to share a little bit of my story of how I came to faith in Jesus Christ. It's really funny because a lot of people have this preconception of Christianity, and I did, that it's a crutch. It's for old ladies, or for people who are kind of weak-minded or a bit feeble and who've got nothing better to do with their lives. And so sometimes you can think, oh well, that's for like pensioners or something like that. It's not really relevant to most people today. And certainly as a young person growing up who really didn't have any real knowledge of what the Christian faith was about, that would have been my view of Christians. They were weak. They were elderly. It wasn't really relevant. I wasn't really interested. If someone was to ask me about the Bible, I would have said, well, it's a bit like Grimm's fairy tales. It's just a load of stories made up. I couldn't probably tell you any of the stories, but in my mind, I'd made my mind up. It's just a load of fables, a load of stories, and old people get comfort from them, so good for them. Anyway, I was actually the youngest of 8 children. I was born, and my mother had a very difficult time. She suffered from quite badly from postnatal depression, so much so that actually she couldn't face the pressure of looking after another child. And actually, with my father, reluctant agreement, I think, they put me up for adoption, and I didn't actually know any of my real family as I grew up. But I was adopted by someone who was loosely related to me, and so I had a family, and so I never knew my real parents until many, many, many years later when I met them, actually over 20 years later after I became a Christian. So I was brought up by a couple, or adopted by a couple who had another child. I had a brother called Matthew, and but I can't actually remember when it was, but I was only really maybe 3 or 4. My adopted father died, and if you were to ask me if I can remember anything about him, I can't. The honest answer is I can't. I don't ever remember any memories of the father that took me into his family. He died before I could ever know. And I've found in my experience over the years now, I'm in my 50s now, that one of the big issues that affects guys is a relationship with their father, one way or the other. I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect father. I'm a father, I've got 5 kids. I love them dearly, I do my best for them, but I know there are many, many times when I perhaps could have done better or could have been a better dad. And I know then, as I grew up in life, that perhaps the biggest issue that affected me, although I wouldn't have admitted it at the time, was the lack of a father in my life. Some people have great dads, and that's good. Some people have had rubbish dads, that's not so good. And some of us, most of us, have probably had dads that are sometimes good and sometimes not so good. Okay? But all the while, our image and our understanding of a father affects how we view God, because the Bible talks about God being the Father. And Jesus says, when the disciples said, teach us to pray, he said, pray, our Father. Those of you who are old enough can remember, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. He taught his disciples to address God as Father. And that relationship is actually really key in the Christian faith. So I didn't know a dad. My first dad allowed me to be put up for adoption. My second dad died. My third dad, by the time I was in my teenagers, I didn't really get on well with him at all. And my parents parted. I went into care. And then my adopted mum, married again, and I had a fourth dad who I beat up. And I actually went to court, and I thought, this is bad. I was totally alienated from my family. So now by the time I was 18, I was a fatherless young man who wanted to live life my way. I had no real strong role model. I had no real example to follow. I'd never had really the opportunity, that relationship that you get with your dad, to learn things and learn about life. I'd had none of that. So at 16, 17, 18, as soon as I left school, I was just out to live for number one. So I used to be out down the pub. As soon as I got paid, be down the pub until your money ran out. Normally by about Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you get paid again on Friday, so it was all good. And that was my life. And so it was going to the pub, it was being with my mates, it was going to the football, it was just hanging out and enjoying yourself and doing what you wanted. But I realised quite early on, at 16, 17, 18, 19, that my life wasn't really going anywhere. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to kind of make my mark in life. But I didn't really have any outstanding talent, so I wasn't a great footballer, I wasn't great at sports, I wasn't a musician, I was never going to be rich and famous or anything like that. And so I wanted to just make money easily. So I had a friend, he actually lived in the flat 2 floors above me where I lived in Dorset at the time, and he was a gypsy. And he was a hulk of a guy, he was 6'7" tall, a giant of a bloke, and he always seemed to have loads of money. And the reason was because he was a villain. And we got on well, we were good mates and got on, and I just kind of got sucked into that lifestyle. And within 3 to 6 months of knowing this guy, I got involved with him, and we used to steal jewellery from jeweller shops in the southwest of England, in Cornwall and Devon and Somerset. We used to go down, we'd suss somewhere out, and I would go into the shop and steal gold rings, bracelets, whatever, and different things. And all of a sudden I had money. And for me, although nobody really knew what I was involved in, I felt I had some significance as well. I actually found something I was quite good at. I didn't get cool. And I thought, actually I'm doing something here that is making my mark. I'm being a man. It's a pathetic thing to say now. I'm ashamed of it now, but at the time, I was ashamed then as well. But inside, I was thinking, it's something I'm good at. And it was in 1986, so it's quite a long time ago. That's just over 30 years ago now. I was in Taunton in Somerset, and I'd gone into a jewellery shop and I'd stolen a platinum and diamond ring that was worth £3,000 at the time. So we're talking 30 years ago, so I don't know how much it'd be worth now, but a lot of money. And I was a bit younger and fitter there. And actually what happened was, as I came out of the shop, the shopkeeper was shouting, "Stop thief," and there was a copper. He came round the corner, just when you don't want him to, and he chased me. I was younger and fitter there, and I managed to get away. And my mate had an escape car lined up. It was a Mini, right? But it was a Mini. Do you remember the old Minis? You open the boot and it came down. Do you know the ones? Yep. It folds out. And what I was going to do is I was going to hide in the boot of the Mini, and he was going to drive off. So if the police were around and they were looking, for two fellas, they'd never think to look in the boot of a Mini. That was the plan. Stupid plan. I outran the police. The getaway car's waiting. The guy opens the boot. I go to dive in, and the back door falls right up under the weight of my body. It's there on the floor. Our plan is in pieces. So the guy throws the boot on the back seat, the door of the boot in the back seat, and left me to it. Drove off, left me to it. I was abandoned. I still had the ring, thankfully. At least he didn't take that. And so I had to find my own way home. I lived in Bournemouth at the time, and this was in Taunton in Somerset. And I tried to work every way I can, and in the end I got a taxi from there to somewhere where I knew this guy bought stolen jewellery. Of course, the police followed that up, and they got this guy. They actually arrested this guy's son because they thought he was the thief. But this guy, he all kind of came with the territory. He wasn't really particularly bothered. And I was still in the clear. I was still okay. We sold the ring, got some money, everything else. Now, this was 1986, about March time. And then, at that time, I went to visit my mum, who had adopted me. And over that period of time, she'd started to go to church again. I'd left home after the fight with my third stepdad, and she'd started to go to church. And her story was actually that she'd been a believer as a youngster. She'd married the man who adopted me, but he wasn't a believer, and she felt in her heart that she'd done something so terrible in marrying someone who didn't believe that she couldn't go to church anymore. And she stopped going. Didn't go to church for 20 years or whatever. She'd started to go back, and she'd started to pray for me. So anyway, I went in there, and it's a bit like, you might be here tonight thinking, the last thing I want to do is hear about God. I'm sat in my mum's house, the last thing I want to do is hear about God. But she said this to me, she said, Alan, she had no idea what I was involved in. She said, Alan, you'll never be happy in life until you get right with God. And I was like, whatever, not really interested. And then she said this, she said, Alan, do you mind if I pray for you? And I thought, pray all you like. Well, I'm not here. But that's not what she meant. She said, can I pray for you here and now? And I was like, oh no. I couldn't think of anything more embarrassing. I was like, no. But it's your mum. And I don't want to upset my mum. So I told her a lie. I said, no, I don't mind if you pray. And I thought, well, it can't hurt. Come here. So I'm sat on the sofa. This is April the 1st, 1986. And my mum starts to pray. And she prayed a one-sentence prayer. It wasn't a long, flowery prayer. She just prayed a very simple prayer. She said, Jesus, will you show yourself to Alan? Will you reveal yourself to Alan? Amen. End of prayer. Well, you think that's not a world-changing prayer particularly. It's not particularly powerful. But just sat there in my mum's lounge. I didn't see God. I didn't hear a voice call my name. But I became aware of God. Probably not for the first time in my life, but for the first time when I realised actually there's something outside of me, more than just me. I was 22 years old. I was a drunk, a thief, a football hooligan, and I thought I was the man. And suddenly I realised God was real. I'm not a good guy, and if I was to die at that point, I would go to a place of permanent judgment. At 22 years old, thinking I was a hard man, I started to cry. It's like, it was really awkward, it was really embarrassing. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, I want to suck them back in to stop them coming out, but I couldn't help myself. The tears just started to flow. And my mother looks at me, she's embarrassed, she's awkward, like, what's going on? There's the last thing she expected to happen. She wanted it to happen, but didn't expect it. And she didn't know what to do. Excuse me. She calls a guy up who goes to her church, and this guy comes round, and he worked a spray, they make spray guns, and he was like a storeman there. And he came in and he told me his story about how he'd become a Christian when he was in the army doing his national service in the 1950s. He explained to me for the first time that I kind of understood about how Jesus had died on the cross in my place. for the things I'd done wrong so that I could be forgiven and so that I could know eternal life. And he said, all you have to do is to pray, invite Jesus into your life, and you can have that eternal life. He said to me, is that something you want to do? Now, I'll be honest with you, I didn't really understand what I was getting into, but I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I did a weird thing, and to be honest, I don't do this very often, but you know, in a more kind of perhaps a religious-y type church, people kneel down a lot to pray, don't they? Sometimes in more traditional churches. I'd never done it before, but in my mum's lounge, I knelt down with this guy, and he led me in a really simple prayer, just inviting Jesus to come into my life and forgive me. Well, I'll be honest with you, I got up, I didn't feel magically different at that moment. But I went back to where I was staying. I was staying at a mate's house, and I was actually sleeping on his sofa because I was hiding. I was on the run from the police, basically. And I looked up at the sky at night, and I saw the stars, and I thought, well, if this God is real, he's made all of this. He's pretty powerful. And I remember I went back to where I was staying. It was dark. I went to sleep. I got up the next day. At that point in time, I wasn't working because I was making enough money through stealing. I didn't need to have a job. And I was walking through Poole Park because I was staying in Poole, and there's a police station there. And as I came by the police station, I just felt compelled to walk in there and hand myself in. I couldn't explain it. It made no sense. I was a free man. Nobody knew. But I knew I just had to walk into that police station and confess. So I walk into the police station, there's the counter, the desk sergeant is there. I said, I think you might be looking for me. He said, why? I said, well, I've been involved in these different raids, stealing jewellery. And he said, oh, come in. He literally did. He was all smiles. Oh, come in, mate. Yeah. They opened the door, and as soon as I walked in, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, we're arresting you on suspicion of theft. They kept me in there. They contacted some officers from a different force. I was actually taken from one police station to another. And because it was late then, I spent the night in the cell. Do you know what, that night I slept in a prison cell. You just get like a mattress and there's not much there. I had the best night's kip. Because I had real peace in my heart for the first time in a long, long time. I woke up the next day, I was interviewed. I confessed to all the crimes I've been involved in. They tried to get me to confess to some I hadn't been involved in. I said, well, I'll help you out as much as I can, but I'm not going to say I've done something that I've not done. And fair enough. I expected, really, because of what I'd done, that I would go to prison. And I got a Christian lawyer, and it went to magistrates' court, too serious for magistrates' court, Crown Court. There's no trial because I'm pleading guilty. So I get to Crown Court in Taunton in Somerset, and the judge is there. And I go prepared to go to prison. Absolutely terrified, but prepared in my heart to go to prison. As I stand before the judge says, I'm not going to send you to prison. I'm not going to put you on probation. I'm not going to fine you. I'm going to give you a community service order, which I did actually working with young people in the local church. But then he said this, and it might be different now, but at this time, he said, I can't make you do this. But if you are the man that you say you are now, I want you to contact the people that you've stolen from and offer to pay them back. And I walked out a free man. But I agreed with what the judge said. I contacted the people that I'd stolen from. I wrote a letter, post like they did in the old days, do you know what I mean? And surprisingly, some actually wrote back and said they didn't want the money because it was covered by insurance. Amazingly, but others said, no, it'd be really great if you paid us back. It took me 14 years, but over the next 14 years, I went to college, I got married, I had kids, but over the next 14 years, I paid back everything I could to the people I'd stolen from. God had changed my heart. Now, why do I share that story? Now, obviously, there's a lot that's really embarrassing and awkward, and most people who even know me now don't even perhaps know that about me, and it's not something I make much of. But the reason I share that with you tonight, and willingly do that tonight, is because I believe that Jesus Christ can change lives. And I would say this, that if you stick with the AlphaMale thing over the next 6, 7, 8 weeks, you'll hear other stories, you'll hear other bits, you'll be able to make up your own mind. No one's going to twist your arm. But I would say this, if you come to the conclusion that what you're hearing is true, then there is no better option than to say, I am actually going to put my life in the hands of Jesus, I'm going to trust him, and I'm going to let him take care of the rest. I'll be very honest with you, life's not been a bed of roses, it's not been easy, it doesn't all become perfect when you become a Christian. But I know this, that had I not done that, who knows where I'd be now, but I know this, God has always been faithful to me all the way through. And even in the points where I've struggled and I've been weak and it's been difficult, because it's not easy, it's a challenge to be a Christian. All those times where I've been weak, God's been strong and he's been able to help me. So, I've known Mike for over 20 years. We met at theological college together and we hit it off really well. And over the last kind of 5 years or so, we've worked a lot together. And what I would say is this, and I know Mike would say this, and I know other guys in the room would say this as well, that the best decision you can make in life is to put your life into the hands of Jesus and say, here I am, I'm not perfect, I haven't got it all together, but I know you died for me, I know that you love me, I know that God can be the perfect Father, and he helped me to be the man you created me to be. So that's it, guys. Thanks very much for listening, and God bless you, and I hope you have a great time over the next few weeks. So take care. Cheers.